Hi, I'm Tim Weatherford, lead instructor from Tulsa Welding School, and we're going to talk about stick welding, or you may have heard it called SMAW for shielded metal arc welding. Same thing. As far as what do you need to stick weld, there's really not a lot to it. You got a machine. You make sure you can either do a DC machine or an AC machine or AC-DC machine, just depending on what kind of application you're going to do with it. This one happens to be a DC only machine. The only thing that really changes is rod selection with it. There's really not too many parts to it. This type of machine, this is a 110 or 240 machine. That's your voltage going into it. This machine's probably going to run up to maybe a 3/32 7018 there and smaller. If you were to try to use any larger rods, probably going to push this thing to its max, so you're probably going to want a larger machine, something that goes up to maybe 200 amps or maybe a 300 amp machine. But for around the house projects, building bracketry, whatever, do just fine. So one of the things we want to make sure that we have for this type of setup, for this machine, this one, the leads aren't fixed into it. So we have the option to switch them for, like if we want to do TIG welding. So they have these disconnects. So you just put them in the machine, lock them in. So for stick welding, we want to make sure we're running DC positive. So on the machine, it's got DC on it on one side, AC, or DC on one side, DC negative on the other side. So if we're going to set this up to stick weld, we're going to put our DC side in. We're going to make sure it goes to our stinger. Common reference for this on the industrial side is going to be a stinger. Also an electrode holder, one of those two is normally what you're going to hear it called. The other thing you're going to have is a ground clamp. They make a variety of different styles of these. They make some that are more heavy duty for more industrial use. It really just depends on how much you're going to be welding, thickness of material that you're going to be welding, all that stuff. So make sure you size it appropriately. It usually has ratings, amperage ratings on the machine. So most of your heat is coming out of this side, but it is going to this side. So make sure it's going to have a heavy enough gauge cable that's going to be tied into it. Make sure that the clamp itself is actually going to be rated for what you're going to be doing. So that's really, there's not a lot else for it. Just make sure you've got two leads, one for your ground side, one for your electrode side, and that's all the basic parts for stick welding. So once we've got all of our basic parts that we need, we've got the machine, we've got our stinger, we've got our ground clamp, we've got our leads. Next thing to think about is what rods we're going to use. So it really depends on the materials that you're using, the thickness of the material that you're trying to weld, the application for it. Basic rod types that's going to be used probably the most commonly is 7018, 6010, 6011, 6013. Now, kind of break the rod code down, what the 6010 means, what the 7018 means. If we break it down, the first two digits, like the 70 of a 7018, is your tensile strength. 70 means 70,000 pounds per square inch on your tensile strength. And then you break the 1 and the 8 down. The second to last number is going to be your rod position or the welding position that you can do. So if you see a 1 on it, it's going to mean it's all positions. It can do flat, it can do vertical, it can do overhead. Same way with the 6010. The 1 tells you it's flat, it's vertical, it's overhead. The last digit on there is going to tell you your flux composition. It's going to tell you if it's a cellulose base, if it's a rutile base, whatever. So most in general, what we're doing, that's probably not going to be the thing we're worried about the most. The other thing to think about is whenever the types of rods, you're dealing with like a 7018 versus a 6010. 7018 is going to be a slow freeze rod. It's got a glass flux that's left behind after the welding's done. You have to wait. The glass actually holds the molten metal into place to help it form and controls the cooling rate. So it's usually more of a ductile type of welding. It has going to have a little more stretch to it. When you're dealing with the 60-10 side of it, then you're dealing with a quick freeze rod. So as soon as you take the arc away from it, you're going to notice the pool just like immediately just cools off. It's going to be a fast freeze. A few of the drawbacks with that is going to be it's going to be a weld that doesn't stretch as much. It's not going to flex as much. So if you're doing something where you tack it and you're trying to bend it or whatever, trying to flex it, to tack it again or to weld it in place, a lot of times those tacks are going to crack. So, you may have to, choose your rods accordingly. So with all that, that's kind of the basic information of selecting your rods.